Right guys, this is just a very quick video. So I've had some people asking, well, one or two people, not many, asking about how to kind of make like a really high-end gun and what makes a really high-end gun. And the answer to that's kind of simple, but also it can be quite complicated depending on how you look at it. You know, what is a high-end gun to you? To me, it's a gun which functions internally very, very well, even though it might not have the best furniture. Sorry, I'll turn this light on. Now, me and my brother, me and Alex, we will do a full strip down video of our guns at some point. But while we're working on getting something set up where it would be like easy for you guys to see and kind of get scripts done and stuff like that, and how we'd go about doing that. For now, I just thought I'd do a little preliminary video with the gun I've just finished building. Now, if you've been in the Facebook chat, you've seen me spam about this thing, and I'm very happy about it. So please, be nice. But this is a gun I built, and this is a scratch-built gun. So it's not something you can buy out the box. This is built kind of from parts. And as I get into it, I'm not going to do a full disassembly, but I'm going to disassemble it enough to show you how it works and be able to explain things. But as I disassemble it, you'll be able to see that, yeah, that is actually scratch built. There are components in here which maybe aren't brand new, and they are from like what you would kind of say entry level guns, but because they're good enough in terms of quality, they can work in a gun like this. So I'm going to start by first taking off the upper receiver. If you don't know what that is, that's this bit here on the it contains the rail. This is the lower receiver here, then you buffer tube, etc. So this section here, I'm just going to go in this quite for newbies as well. Because this gun has a split gearbox, which you'll see later on, the disassembly method for this gun won't be the same. Even if you have something like an ICS split, it won't be the same. I would actually say the ICS split's easier to disassemble than the retro arm split gearbox, which is in here, but you'll see that later. So on most M4s, if not all M4s, the way you're going to disassemble and take this upper from the lower, which is the first step in disassembly, is quite simple. So you want to take something, it's like a screwdriver, and you see that there's this front pin here, just right here. I know it's hard to see because I don't have a good camera setup. And then you just want to give it a little tap, and you'll see it'll come through. Sometimes that can be stiff, but don't worry about it. And this pin comes straight out. So this is sometimes they're screwed in, like this back one, and I'll explain that one later why that one's screwed in. Sometimes they're just friction. So that's a friction one. You can see how there's little notches on it, maybe just about on the near the head there. There's some notches. Turn off the light so you can see it. Yeah. Anyway, it doesn't matter. And that's just to stop it from falling out. It gives a bit of friction. On most G&G combat machines and a lot of guns now, these pins are self-returning. One sec. Let's focus. Focus. There we go. The pins are self-returning. So yeah, don't worry if it doesn't come all the way out as long as it clears that. So what we can do there is we can then pull the upper and lower assemblies off like that in two. So this is your gearbox, obviously, with the rest of it in. This will work fine. And this is your front. So this is the front of the gun, and in here we have our hop unit here. Mine's a little stiff in, again, because this has been a scratch-built gun. One of the problems you encounter is manufacturing tolerances. So I'm just going to give mine a little tap. There we go, it comes straight out. Okay, now, the first bit of evidence, this is a scratch-built gun. And some of you might be onto it now, but if you look at that barrel, you'll realise something. If stock, the end of this receiver comes up to about here, okay, without this barrel extension on it, comes to about here, you'll notice that if the hop unit's sitting about there, you'll see that this barrel is longer than the actual receiver. And that is because this barrel is not a normal barrel. This would be the normal size barrel. You can see the difference here. Ignore the white bit. I'll explain why that's got a white bit in the hop window. This would be a normal size barrel. You see this is a bit longer. This barrel is actually from the original barrel from my Krytac LVOA-S. So this is a 310mm, very well crowned barrel. See there, the crowning. It's hard to show on my camera. My camera's not great quality. Sorry about that. I'm having to use a Logitech webcam for this. It's not a bad one, but it's just not great for actual still recording. But yeah, so so that is a Krytac LVOA-S barrel, and I'll be honest, I think compared to the tight ball upgrade I put in it, which was the Prometheus. This is my LVOA, of course. The Prometheus LVOA-S barrel. This performs arguably just as well. This is the this bent little thing here is the shirt. This is a hop-up spring, and this puts tension on the hub to keep it nice and close to the gearbox to give a good air seal. So you want to make sure you don't lose that. Generally, I actually don't use them. I shim with O-rings. You shim your barrel closer to your hop unit, but I'll do that in a later tech video where I explain these things. There's a great guide by the Airsoft Tech on YouTube, and he's a very, very good source for this kind of stuff. So I'm gonna zoom in my camera a little bit more now, just so you get a better view. Come on, it's just a bit better. Okay, right, and we zoomed in a little bit just so you get a better view. So this is the gearbox. Now, if you can see here, this cylinder is very similar to, or you might have seen these around, and this is actually just from a G&G combat machine. This is a really, really standard cylinder, but it works for the build. The pausing here is irrelevant, and you'll see why later, but instead of there being a full stroke where the piston goes all the way back to about here and then comes back where there's porting, you don't get compression until after the porting, obviously. That doesn't matter in this build because of the short stroking of the piston. Where I'll show that later with the piston and the sector gear. You'll see that actually it doesn't go far enough to actually engage with this porting, so the piston only goes back to about here. There are 5 teeth off, and that will become evident. So there's 5 teeth off the piston rack and the sector gear, which is important to do both. In theory, you could do one, but not the other. Like people think, oh, I'll only take it off the gear. But actually, if you don't take it off the rack and the gear, or vice versa, you will run into problems with pre-engagement if you're running a build like this. And that's what I'm gonna show about. So the next stage we've got to do is a bit of a fiddly one. 2 ways of doing this. So the next 2 things I've got to take out is this pin here, the lower receiver pin. I'm sure on the other side. In this case, it's got this screw point on it here. Put this on to safe. It doesn't really matter. And I need to take out the screw of the buffer tube. So I'm going to take the stock off first, and that can be a bit of a pain for this gun, just because it's so bear with. This is it's because this stock tube is not a G&P stock tube, despite these receivers etc. being G&P. The stock tube is not. The stock tube is a D-Boys one, because again this is built from scratch. This is not a gun you could go out and buy. So there we go. Stock tubes off. You can see here these are Dean's connectors. On a build that's going to draw a lot of current, Dean's connectors are quite important because they reduce the resistance and prevent heat. And also they can if you have a bottleneck with current in your system, which can happen on a build like this, then you will then Dean's will prevent any kind of they might increase your fire rate. By removing that bottleneck. So just to go over what's in here now. So this is a 12.6 to 1 gear set. So this is SHS 12 to 1s gears and an SHS High Torque Motor. So the theoretical RPS without any load is about 40 rounds per second, 40 RPS. The real world RPS is between 30 is about 35, but I mean they can dip down to the 20s depending on how your battery's charged and if it's getting enough current. So current draw, you really need big beefy batteries with these kind of builds. This isn't a dual sector gear. It's a very big misconception that dual sector gear builds are needed for high RPS, when in reality, so I'm just going to zoom my camera back out. In reality, dual sector builds are kind of for going above 40 RPS in my experience. You can get up to 40 RPS on a single sector without a DSG. Personally, I prefer single sector gear builds. I don't really see much point going over 40 RPS because I mean that's pretty insane anyway. And there are other problems, but again that's a video for another time. If you actually want to look up, there's plenty of people documenting their experiences with building a DSG and then actually then using it, because they are interesting. So this can be a bit finicky trying to get the screw out of here, just because of the wires and space, and my screwdriver's not quite long enough for my gun. I will point out, there we go, I've got it first try. Look at recording. I will point out there are things that I do in my guns which I wouldn't recommend doing it, and I wouldn't do it to other people's guns. They're just something I would do with mine, because when I build something for myself, if something goes wrong, I fix it, and I like fixing my guns. So I'll experiment a bit with my guns. Whereas when it's someone else's gun, so if you give me your gun to look over, etc., I won't experiment with it, because I'm going to do something that works. Because I don't want you to turn up to a day and your gun doesn't work. That's not you know, that's not good. You wouldn't pay me to do that. You know, if it works, oh, that'd be great. But if it doesn't work, well, then I haven't fulfilled my job. So generally, there will be things I do to my gun which I'm fine with, because I really enjoy opening this thing up. I enjoy the building of the gun, arguably more than playing it. So playing with it. So that's, you know, that's just me. But I will explain those things if you see them. So this was yeah. So the stock tube's off, which is like the easiest to ever take it off, because it can be a bitch. Because I used to have like a really long screwdriver, which would like here, which would really good, like 30 centimeters long, a foot long. But me and my brother seem to have misplaced it. But this screwdriver does fine. Especially on with buffer tubes, which have kind of two splits down the middle, two splits down it here. Generally, you'll find that this screwdriver works absolutely fine. Okay, so this is the next screw we're going to take out. Okay, and we need my screwdriver, which I've misplaced. Oh no, this is oh well, I'm doing a one take cut of this bit. I could have sworn I had a different screwdriver lined up, but apparently I didn't. So yeah, this is definitely like a unlisted video on YouTube. Like this isn't a reflection of my quality. I do guns, not YouTube videos, and I occasionally streamed. There's a message in the Airsoft chat, the very active Airsoft chat. Let's put this back over here. Yeah, so the next thing is this receiver pin here. So the reason this receiver pin is has a screw on it is because this isn't one of the stock receiver pins. Because this is a split gearbox, there are issues with fitment, with having them serrated edges. So to avoid that, again, we're just going to give it a little bit of a tap. Should help it come out. This one needs a bit more a tap again, because it's not meant for this particular receiver. Don't want to damage the threads either. So yeah, so this is actually a Garda pin. They're very easy to obtain. They're very cheap. They're you can get these standard replacements. So if you ever have a pin break, or more likely you lose a pin, you can put the screw together like that. So keep them together like that, so they're easy to keep track of. Yeah, they are yeah. So if you can get replacements for them. That's not a big problem. Put this pin with that one. Like that. I like to use these little, usually if I'm not doing something like this, I use these little boxes that I've got, like loads of them. Yeah. So all I'm going to do here, so now I've taken this pin out, it can be a bit fiddly, but with this being a split gearbox, the upper part, so the way I like to define the gearbox is, upper part is your compression and what gets you your FPS. The lower part is your gearbox, and this is very layman's term obviously, which gets you your RPS. So think of this as rate of fire and trigger response versus your FPS and your compression and your kind of like consistency. Obviously, though, there are factors other than that. So this gearbox, depending how the tappet plate's engaged, can usually just break it apart just at the top here. Just need a little bit of a wiggle often. You can use a little bit of a wiggle. Again, it depends how the tappet plate's been engaged. There we go. So it pops straight off. Yeah. So now we can see inside. No, most gearboxes won't do this. Okay, there'll be one straight piece, but you can see here we have the sector gear there. You can see it's missing some teeth. That's the short stroke I was talking about. And then we have, so bring it up. We have the sector gear here, the spare gear here, and then all the way at the bottom, which you probably can't see, we have our bevel gear and the motor pinion gear that are in contact. This is you can see how much plays on this gearbox. Now this is something where I might shim I would definitely shim if I was doing a gun for someone, I would definitely shim it a little bit better than this. But because this is using very high quality ball bearings in this particular gun, shimming becomes less important, because the thing is with ball bearings, they tend to figure out their placement in the gearbox as they spin, and if you shim a ball bearing too tightly, it will explode. Even very high quality ones will, because of the stress. It's not even across the surface. It's obviously got like different contact points. So actually, if you can hear it in videos, this plays absolutely fine, as long as the play is kind of relative, and it gets itself nice and stuck in. Although I don't quite like how much this plays around. I've not had any problems, and the gun sounds absolutely fine. So you can see there. So you can see how there's teeth being dremeled off here. That's 5 teeth here off the gear, which makes the gear, instead of it being a nice, might have an example of it here. So with this sector gear, this is a normal sector gear. Okay, we can see how it's got half of it, it's half covered in teeth. Okay, then we take one which has had, is that one? Nope, that's another full one. Do I have another one? No, I done 8. Oh yes, it's in my Krytac, that's why. I haven't taken the teeth off yet. So this, you can see how 5 teeth off this actually means you're only getting to about here. You know, there's a lot less. The piston's going to be pulled back a lot, nowhere near as far, and therefore you have to use a higher spring to compensate for the lack of FPS. The general rule and the general term is that for every tooth you take off the sector gear, you're losing between 15 and 30 FPS, and that's you know, that's a big margin. But think of it between, I always think between 3 and 5 meters a second in terms of that. And arguably, instead of cutting down your spring, because cutting down a spring can lead to problems with consistency because you're changing the actual properties of the spring, especially with the heat you're applying. Arguably, short stroking, and I would prefer short stroking as the better and more consistent way to reduce your FPS. Especially if you've not got a quick change spring system. Reducing your FPS through short stroking makes more sense to me because, I mean, you're already opening up the full gearbox, but this does have a quick change spring system, which, as someone who takes part guns, is like amazing to live with, especially when you need short stroke. So we can see here, this is a 21mm SHS air nozzle. It's purple, just deal with it. You don't see it, don't matter. And you can see here that this tappet plate is a retro Arms POM tappet plate. These are incredibly strong tappet plates. They really are. And that's a good and a bad thing, because sometimes you want to shave down your tappet plate, especially instead of using a sectored layer chip. I do use one. I know they're not, from a technical standpoint, you're better actually shaving down your tappet plate and shaving down your tappet plate spring to make it more tense than using a sectored layer chip. But I'm not going to get into that here. It's something more, it's a bit more in depth. But for most people, a sectored layer chip will be fine, and for me, it works. So yeah, this is you can see as it moves back. So the way your gun works is there's a small pin on the sector gear, and as it rotates, it pulls the air nozzle back, which when timed correctly allows a BB to enter the hop unit, and then as it pushes forward, you should have compression, and then it fire the BB out, and the whole process repeats in a cycle. There's probably some good animations on YouTube, or like just some GIFs on Google, so you can see how that works in a bit more detail. But that's the general gist of it. So now we're going to get into the upper, and I'm going to show you what you have to do to the upper assembly of the gearbox. I'm going to show you that. First, I'm going to do something. Now, I don't recommend, if you have a split gearbox, I do not recommend you doing what I'm about to do, which is firing the gun with the top open. And the main reason for that is there's obviously nothing here to protect you from putting your fingers in there, and it will not stop. If you put your fingers in there, you're going to get a very nice, nasty, mangled finger, or you could lose a finger, so just don't do that. Also, this here is not a normal trigger housing. That is a gate tighten, and when I power it up, you will see that isn't a normal trigger housing because it uses optical sensors, and you will see a red light, which does not mean bad things are happening. It just uses a red light because red light wavelength works best, apparently. So we're going to use, this isn't fully charged, but this is an 11.1 volt LiPo, 1300 milliamp hour. I would suggest something about 2000, maybe 3000 milliamp hour for a gun like this. It can be a pain when you're just using a normal stock, crane stock in this case. But I've got some plans to modify this to fit some bigger batteries, which should work. So yeah. So as you can see, when I plugged it in, you heard the beeps. That was the Titan counting how many cells. So this is a 3-cell battery, so it made three beeps. Oh god. Webcam's not good. I'm not even going to proof watch this, by the way. I'm just going to upload it and pray for the best. And you can see how the gears teeth have actually moved out the way. So now we've got all nice and smooth because it's been ready. And you can see there's a red light on. When I put the gun on safe, there is no light. When I put it to semi, light. And same with automatic, there'll be a light. You can see the light down there. And that's because it's using an optical sensor. If there's none of that red light, then no light of that wavelength, then the gun won't fire. Second there's a red light, it's good to go. So if you take a look, you'll see what the gate tighten does. So go 1 sec. Now it's a little bit weird because this is a no load scenario, so the Titan's very confused right now. The Titan uses a lot of complicated maths to figure out what it's meant to do. And you'll know, and what usually happens is the Titan will reset. So this is as if it's got pre-cocking on, again because there's no match. But the Titan will reset to the same place generally every time. So obviously, full auto, it doesn't abide by that rule, which is why you're always meant to fire your gun in semi afterwards, because that'll uncock it if it's been left pre-cocked and help increase the life of the spring. But you can see how it generally returns to the same place, and that's very, very useful for shot-to-shot consistency. I'm leaving it like this because when I'm going to put the gun back together, I can't have any gear teeth showing so that I can put the upper back in nicely without having to disassemble the gearbox. But that's the lower portion of the gearbox. I'll do a better video on that at some point when we get a better camera set up, but I just wanted to go through that quickly. Upper compression and consistency. First things first, remove the spring. This is why I love quick change springs, because they're a lot easier to get in and get out and just make life on the gearbox easier. So this can be a little finicky because of retro arms. Thank you, retro arms. But all I'm going to do is take an Allen key. I'm not quite sure what size this is. They all seem to be a general size. And my spring guard went down the side. Right, that doesn't matter. We'll get that later. So this is an M110 spring. Pretty, straightforward. This is a genuine Madbull spring. Just stick with good quality springs. Madbull ASG. ASG springs tend not to like to be short stroked, especially as much as I've done it. So yeah, just bear that in mind. So this is a Madbull spring. These are fine. These are great quality. This is an M120 spring. I'll be right back. Right, okay, I'm back. I've retrieved the spring guide now. You can see. So this spring guide goes on the most densely coiled area of the spring, which is this one here. There are such things as linear springs which don't have that, and well, at that point any end goes, I guess, unless it's marked, unless you're told otherwise. So let me put my zoom on a little bit. Again, I haven't quite got things figured out yet with the webcam. So this is, more than anything, this isn't a show off of the gun. This is actually a trials run of how I'm going to do this in the future. Okay. Let's double check the resolution. Yeah, that's good. Okay. Here we go. What's this? Move this down a bit as well. I'm literally having to blue tack a camera onto the whiteboard. Oh! There we go. That works. Right. So yes. Here we go. So to take this apart, look at the screws. Now the spring's out. We obviously don't want to take the screws out before the spring's out because everything will ping up and we could lose it. Okay. So take this screwdriver here, which has got the right bit in it. And twist. Now, these screws in here are not the retro arm screws this came with because they were all very weird and they didn't look long enough. So these are actually ZCI just gearbox screws, and that's true for the rest of this gun. Just because they're actually standard Phillips head screws, and makes life a lot easier, and they do the job. And arguably, I'd say these do a better job because they seem to have the longer screws with more proportional threading. Put it that way, they seem to work better in the gun. If you're a mechanical engineer, you're probably screaming because I don't do mechanical, I do electrical. My brother Alex does mechanical, so yeah. Means I'll be doing a lot of Dean's rewiring when you all decide to move to the superior Dean's master race connector. Right, okay. So this is the portion of the gearbox here. Put that here like that. This is something I'm doing a lot, by the way, going to the upper. And we'll see. This is our compression. First thing I want to do is so it doesn't go pinging off is take our tappet plate spring. And with just a pair of pliers, we're just going to take it up. There we go. And take it off that post. And there we go. So there's the tappet plate. And that's the other side of the gearbox. When it comes to lubing the gearbox, a very, very small amount of silicone oil is needed. Not much. Enough kind of on this O-ring to give good compression. Good. Let's do a compression test quickly. Yeah, you see, once it's past the porting, that's not going anywhere. Good, nice, high, consistent FPS. So this is pretty standard. I'm not going to go too much into this part. However, I will go into the piston because I think this is quite important. So this is the short stroking that's gone on. You can see where there's actually been 5 teeth here. It might only look like 4 on video, but there's been 5 teeth removed from this piston. Very, very neatly. You can barely even feel it. And this one's been dremeled. The second pickup tooth here has just been dremeled away even more slightly than it was from the factory, just to allow for better angle of engagement. My angle of engagement is definitely not perfect in this gun, but it's acceptable, and especially at the build I've got, it's very acceptable for that. So you can see here that there's very few teeth on this piston left, and you can see how that might impede it from being pulled back. Now I'm going to get you an example that I see a lot of people incorrectly. Well, they are short stroking their piston, but it's a very messy way of doing it, and this is where I've seen people do it in the past, and this is an example of it. So this is people. So the way you're meant to do it is you're meant to hammer. So you take the piston head off. This is a retrounce piston head, polymer, and then you can slide this rail out. Or if it doesn't slide out because they might have glued it from the factory, you can apply a very, very small amount of heat, form of a lighter, a very light blowtorch heat, and then you generally nudge or hammer this thing out, and it will come out. And then you file it, or you sand it down with something like a Dremel. A hand file will take forever, so just don't. And then you make it, polish it, clean it, make sure all the metal dust is gone, and you put it back in. Some people try to be lazy and they do this. And it's hard to see on camera, but they haven't taken it out of they haven't taken the piston rack, probably because it's glued in pretty tightly. But if you apply a bit of heat and got a hammer to it, you would get this out no problem. Standard kind of piston. So yeah, you can see this has had 3 teeth removed for like a 30 RPS build, something like that. And they've gone over this tooth again. Not done such a bad job here. I guess this second to last tooth here, or the second tooth next to the pickup tooth. But these 3 here are definitely there's still little bits that could get snagged. And I see this all the time. So again, try to be more careful, especially if you're buying a second-hand gun. People do it's like, all right, it's fine, and then later on there'll be some PME, and just very, very slight PME. But if they've passed it on to you and you're putting a lot of BB through it, all of a sudden the gun can break, and it's like, oh no, but I can still feel this is pretty rough. And depending on how the tolerances are in the rest of your gun, that could cause issues with PME. So make sure if you're getting a gun, I would advise if you're buying second-hand guns, especially if they've said they've done stuff to it, I would be cautious, because there's a lot of people in airsoft who do things. A lot of people because there is no such thing as like a qualified kind of tech. It's just like you mess with guns, and the difference is I would never mess with a gun I'm selling unless it was just kind of like polishing it up, which is what I do all the time. So I'm going to put this back together now. Put these together like this. Now, I like to leave this out just a little bit, just to make sure it sits correctly. And I'll take the screws out of it like that. So we're going to clip this together. So it should just about clip. You have to do a little bit of fiddling sometimes just to make sure it all sits nicely. There we go. And then once it's all screwed together like that, you can see how there's no kind of crease along the top. It's all nice and firmly put together from the bottom. Just the pistons, the cylinders in the correct place, etc. Now we're just going to start screwing this thing back together. So short screw from the top. Again, because there's no spring in here, there's no real audio to put these screws in, because you're not having to keep keep tension. So, but still, I like to start from the right and work my way left, or something like that. If you want me and Alex to take a look at your gun, like upgrade it, whatever, and it will, and it's not like a hop unit change, and it involves going inside the gearbox, changing springs, changing gears, or even something as extreme as installing a gate titan. I would very much prefer it if you had a gun with a quick change spring system, because it just makes life a little bit easier, because there are lots of little finicky parts like anti-reversal springs, which they do go missing. Like it's something on my guns, because I'm often in a rush taking mine apart. I'm not when I'm taking someone else's gun apart, but they do go missing, and I have plenty of spares because of that. So it's not a problem, but it's just kind of an advice of saying, like, it helps if there's not loads of tension in the gearbox, which could cause a massive ping and your entire gearbox to kind of go, whoa, everything's all over the place. But I mean, yeah, Just something to bear in mind. So you want to make these nice and tight. Just double check before I put the spring in that these are tight. I will say these springs in a very high RPS build like this, these screws can have a habit of unscrewing themselves as the gun vibrates. So you want to make sure you put them nice and tight, and just going to double check to put the spring. Yep, you can see there's very little resistance. The spring comes right back. Sometimes when people try to upgrade their guns, people tend to change out air nozzles, and the length of your air nozzle, like by 0.1 of a millimeter, like tenths of a millimeter, can make such a huge difference, even hundredths of a millimeter. So when people change out their upper end, you know, they're like, oh, I'm selling my gun now, etc. Be careful, because I know for Jenko's gun, my brother's just finished looking at, there were problems where the guy who'd had it had changed out the upper air nozzle, and he just kind of bought a new one, stuck it in, and was like, oh, I'll sell the gun now. And the air nozzle was too long, and it was causing issues with the rest of the gun. On a side note, if me and Alex upgrade a motor for you, like put a different motor in as well, so something like this 22 TPA, which I just have lying around, ASG Infinity CNC motor, or equally something like this on the other end of the spectrum, this 40k low TPA ASG CNC Infinity motor, be aware that we also do prefer, we also would like a quick change spring system. Obviously, if you don't have it, we'll still deal with the gun anyway. It just helps because, like, something like this, we would reshim the gun. We would reshim it to make sure that there's no nasty problems happening inside the gearbox where motor height is wrong. So the next thing we're going to do is put the spring back in. But nice and thick. If I could show you as well, like piston resistance wise, very, very small amount, but yeah, there we go. Just even very lightly holding it, so you can see piston goes back and forth in there quite nicely. And it'll be pulled to about here before then it'll be let go, obviously. So again, if you see the actual the piston head in a normal gun would go all the way back here, kind of, almost. So it clears this porting here. In my gun, it goes to about here. So you can see that the piston head's probably about here in the shell, and it's not actually reaching this porting. So this acts as like a full sealed cylinder. So yeah, there we go. These are all things you have to take into account. And an airsoft gun is a very balanced system. And even when you just double check, yep, so more tightly packed coiled end spring. Even when you start, you know, doing things which shouldn't really cause much of a problem, you do have to take into account that, hey, this system has now changed, and you have to change other parts to compensate. Now, this spring can be quite hard to compress, which is why it went pinging. Because again, it's an M120. This is meant for about 400 FPS. Realistically, this is meant for more than 400 FPS because of your gun's air seal. I've always found that springs are always a lot higher than the rating of them. Maybe because that is true though, because my guns have a very good air seal because I take them apart regularly and make sure they're well maintained, etc. If you've just kind of got like a standard gun, then that might be the case. I'm just going to pull this close to my body while I put the spring in. I've got silicone oil on my Allen key. This is not good. Oh, 1 sec. I need to wipe down my hands. Always keep a pack of tissues nearby. I'm not the muscliest guy either, so another reason I don't like a DSG is a DSG will effectively remove your quick change spring system. So wiping this down with a tissue, dry tissue, because it becomes so hard to compress, say like an M150, M160, M170, that you just can't use that quick change spring anymore. So yeah, that's another reason against DSGs in my opinion. That being said, a well set up DSG is a very fun gun. And there we go. There we go. So it's put there. So that was the spring in. I'm going to touch the spring a bit, and there we go. So that's the spring inside. See the bottom there, the spring guide in. The two little tabs that you pushed in, no longer visible, and they're sitting at these two sides of the gearbox. So yep, all's well. And we'll double check our. Yep, it's nice and snappy. So that's good. Tappet looks good. Everything looks good. Let's go. So before I put it back together completely, I am going to touch on my hop unit. So I do dabble with air hops and flat hops and regular hop units, not S hops. I don't do Sugu hops. I do something similar to Sugu hops, but they end up being full-fledged air hops. So I will do a video, and there are plenty of informational videos on our hops. The problem is a lot of them videos are based on American guns or European guns. In Britain, we only shoot at 350 feet per second on an AEG like this. Because of that, because of the weights of BBs we would typically use in the UK, I don't think for a standard AEG, even one that's bang on the limit of 350, then our hop, like this, is actually that good. And I say that as someone who makes them and uses them frequently. In this gun, this gun over here, I just use a very weird combination of normal bookings and it gets the job done. Will I probably use a flat hop? Yes. At some point, I'll probably switch this out for a flat hop because our hops and flat hops tend to be more durable, especially in a high RPS gun where there's more wear and tear on the hop unit than a regular hop. But I would only recommend an R hop for a DMR or an electric sniper. A bolt action, VSRs, they've got their own methods of hopping, and you can R hop them, etc. But for just regular kind of AEG setup barrels and hop rubber kind of configurations, I would recommend a flat hop and R hops for DMRs only. And I would only really R hop if you intend to use BBs heavier than like 0.43s. I mean, flat hops seem to work fantastic for flat hops, and R hops essentially do the same thing. It's just that R hops can put even more hop on than a flat hop, and therefore you can use heavier BBs more effectively. So again, for an AEG, you'll see people say, "Oh, I've had R hops in my LV where they were fantastic. They were really good. Don't get me wrong. Just that the results, and bear in mind, I did these myself. I didn't have to pay anyone else to do them. But the results weren't really worth if I'd have had to pay for this. And it was a very good. I can't show it because I actually removed it the other week, and I shouldn't have done that. But it was a very good R hop. It was standard. This is a molded R hop. So this isn't a Sugru. This is actually proper silicon. And you can see down the barrel, it's not a very clean barrel because this doesn't get used. It just gets shown. It's not intruding in the barrel anywhere. But yeah, it's a perfect little press on it there. You can see it at the top. If I press on it, you can see it come through. But yeah, these work great, but just not really worth it. But if you use a DMR or an electric sniper where you'll be using heavyweight BBs at a higher FPS, 400 to 450, etc., then I would recommend it. Otherwise, by all means, I'll install them. Pardon me. But I won't charge a great deal for them because I find them. I have a lot of specialist tools to help me do it, and I'm used to doing it. And I don't mind doing it. I like doing this kind of thing. And also the reason I won't charge a great deal from is because I don't think they will be. I don't want you to get your hopes of thinking it's a huge like massive upgrade to your gun when actually it's maybe not. So just bear that in mind. I'm saying this as someone who would stand to profit off you wanting an R-hop. So that says a lot. So we're going to put this back together like this now. So this backwards. Push the air nozzle down. Set flare chip. Alright, so there we go. Flips together. Now we're just got to keep it nice and tense while I get the spring. While I get the pin. I'm going to put the pin through the back. Now, again, I'm going to do this one needs hammering it again because it's that aftermarket. It's not quite as, doesn't just kind of slide in. I will be doing a much more in-depth, a better video where you can see, where I'll fully strip. Well, me and my brother, we've got 4 guns, 2 each, which are like quite, kind of like dream setups for a lot of people. Not to humble brag, but, to humble brag at the same time. And we will do a full strip down of them, as in we take the entire things apart, and the camera angles will be much better. This is kind of a demo video for anyone who's just kind of more interested in like the basics of this gun. I don't know how well I've gone over this. Again, I'm probably just going to do just cut some little bits out and then upload it. But yeah, this camera angle, I'm having to mount my camera on a white bar opposite me and then flip it 180 degrees so it looks like it's on top of me. So yeah, this is a challenge, and we're going to try and get hold of a GoPro and a head mount to do this, because again, the zoom's really weird, because a GoPro fixes that by having different lens, a much better lens system. So I'm going to put the, this is obviously essential, but this is your little non-functioning bolt release. Actually, I'm going to take that out for now because stop back on. So this can be a bit fiddly again because I'm missing my long screwdriver. It's important that you put this back in before you fire the gun, mainly because of the spring. The spring won't be held straight in the gearbox, and if you fire it, it could cause quite nasty things to happen. This is not true in a Krytac, however. Krytacs, the buffer tube screw does not go through all the way to the gearbox, and therefore you can't get away without putting the stock tube on before firing. But still, it's, yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. Push this down. Try and show it closer to you guys. Right, I'm gonna move the camera back up actually now before I start screwing to get more of an overview of what's going on. My recording mic as well is broken, so I'm having to use a headset mic, so that's nowhere near as good. Again, this is just kind of a taster. So if you would be interested in a more in-depth thing, again, I don't want to do these and there's people that are interested in them because, you know, this isn't everyone's cup of tea, and I get that. I really like this side of airsoft and everything, but this isn't for everybody. So no harm, no foul if you don't want to see kind of things like this. But if there are people who are genuinely interested in this after I've done this like video and would actually see would like to see a proper edited, properly filmed video, by all means, that will happen. And me and my brother will do one, probably 4 on a YouTube channel we'll set up. I think my brother's already set up a YouTube channel, it's just not, you know, ready yet. Oh, this is a pain. Yeah, this is what I hate. Can't ever quite see down these. And going in. I don't know if I've got it. Again, with a really long screwdriver, you have a much better time. Nope. Come on. So I was amazed I got it out first time. Just getting the screw lined up. Got it in so far, I just need to actually get it in all the way. Again, this is another piece which can wiggle itself free in a high RPS build. Personally, in terms of builds I like, in terms of fire it, I don't like these kind of builds. Even though I've got one and I've just made one, it might seem very hypocritical. But the reason for that is they can feel like they're rattling themselves to pieces, which is kind of like, if you think about it, that's, yeah, they kind of do. You know, anything like this. My favorite kind of builds to do are about 20 RPS high trigger response builds, so 20 to 24 kind of RPS builds. They work much better. Let's say if I can just get this in the light, I can see where I'm putting the screw. Right, okay, so put it back, put the stock tube back on. A little bit of a jump cut there. You won't notice it, don't worry. It didn't take me like a couple of minutes. I'll just get a torch down there. Yeah, stock tubes are a bit of a bitch. Like the easiest thing if you've got a long screwdriver, but since I lost mine, which I'll be replacing very soon, yeah, that can be a bitch. A bitch. Put the butt stuck on yet. We'll just put the this back in. Next thing I'm gonna do is kind of a bit personal, but because this hop unit here is a bit raggedy-taggedy, a bit iffy, I'm just going to put some PTF E-tape on it. Now, you don't need a lot, obviously, but I'm doing this for 2 reasons. One, because I don't have any O-rings to shim with, and I know just about how much it needs. And 2, to help with the air seal. If you've got like a stock hop-up unit and your FPS is fine, don't bother doing this. Like, people love to put PTF E-tape all over it. Look at my air seal. But in reality, it might not even be needed or even make any difference. But because this is a very interesting setup, then I would absolutely. And having used this, I'm just going to put this on. I do believe my gun's actually firing slightly hot, but should manage to fix itself. Yes, because it's running slightly hot, this should be able to be okay. But yeah, you can see just a tight one there. That's really where you're going to lose all the air seal around there. So inside here we have a G&G Green bucking and a Prometheus purple nub, just because I've got loads of them left over. And I like G&G Green bucking. It's when I build a gun, if it doesn't feed right, I know that I need better, like kind of more solid bucking lips. So I'll go with something like Prometheus purple, but that's a little bit more expensive. Whereas if it feeds fine, I might go to something like a GAD 50 degree, which is incredibly soft. I would argue that thing is too soft for feeding BBs reliably. But G&G Green's like a good middle ground where it's easy to obtain and it performs fantastically in cold weather. You know, GAD 50 degree, etc. I'm not a fan of ASG bookings or hop units because they tend to over tolerance. Not a bad thing if you're using all ASG parts, but because I'm building from scratch, yeah, that it's not really much of an option. But I do have ASG booking lying around, and ASG 50 degree makes a good replacement booking. But again, because I'm dealing with like these cogs, this is an SHS hop unit with G&P cogs and then a Prometheus cog. So and an SHS and a G&P arm as well. So you know this is just and SHS clips. So yeah, this is an absolute mess. But I mean this works perfectly. I don't really see any point to upgrade this. Maybe to a tight bar if I get some money and I get curious. So the next thing I'm gonna do is put a little bent spring on. Again, if I shim this with O-rings, there's really no point. But since I don't have any around right now, just need to make sure it stays in place roughly. It can just wobble out, so it's good to maybe get some pliers on it. Got PTFE tape all over, brilliant. But yeah, I have a hefty supply of this stuff just because it's very useful. Sometimes needs to be forced on. Get it by the end there, and just force it on a bit. Again, this spring doesn't really fit that well because it was for a different hop unit. But at the end, nub was different. I don't like using these springs anyway because springs oscillate, O-rings don't. Oh, there it goes. Ah, well, found it. Right, it belongs to the floor now, but again, if I just shim it properly, shouldn't really do it. What I want to show first, though, is I want to show what happens when by the gun with load. Yep, so the gear's then engaged, so there was a load, and you can see that the it's very, very fast, so it might not show on the camera. How you see the oscillates back. The air nozzle's very quick, and in full auto, just a little burst. So yeah, you can see that. But yeah, we'll go to semi now. It's a bit of a mess. Just to uncock the gun. And we know it's uncocked because if we look at the viewport here, we can see how the porting through the point, you can see how the piston's far forward, not far backwards. So we know that the spring's uncocked, which is good for this lifetime of the spring. Although this one could be left with being cocked for a little while, just to reduce its FPS to a more manageable amount. So next we're going to put a hop unit back in with our little spring. So at the same time, I do run, a lot of time people take these little plates out, but I like to take this one in, put this in this gun. My other gun's kind of my messing gun. I like to have this one a bit more true to form, a bit neater. So let's take our hop unit, that facing towards us. Just slide it down. Show this, it's out the way, there we go. A little spring, and we could probably try and stick it on. If it doesn't want to stay on, that's alright. This will get shimmed very soon with the rings. Just to stay on loosely for now. I didn't even want to stay on loosely. Okay, well, so what we're going to take is, so to make up for the fact we don't have any O-rings, I'm going to take some PTF tape. See that spring's knackered anyway. And we're just going to go around this like this. We're going to shim it, just make a little band around here. Absolutely, it should be O-rings instead. But again, that we don't have that choice. It needs about 1 or 2 O-rings on this usually. You don't need loads. Just want it to be a bit springy when you tighten it. Oh, I can feel it now. Maybe one more. Make sure the spring's out of there. Yep. In fact, you know what? I'm just going to give it a go and see if it will go on. So sticking this just a little bit. You don't want to use glue on these kind of things. People really like to glue certain things in, like hop nubs. I've seen a lot of them fixing some guys' guns this weekend at Humber. Not big fix. It's just like the guns jammed up, and they were asking if someone could help them. So did that. There we go with the spring in, nice and bouncy. So we're going to push this back, reassemble it. We're going to put it over like this. Right, and oh, I nearly forgot my bolt catch. No, always forget that. Right, and we're going to put this like that. There we go. Very strong magnets in SHS motor. We'll take the screwdriver with it. That out the way, that way, and so we can see here it doesn't want to quite fit together. That's good. That's what we want. We want this little bounce back from the receiver. So you can see how the receiver's kind of not quite closed, but if we put a little force on it, it'll close up nicely. And while we hold it together on the rear like this, ooh, if I don't move my mat all the time, there, my anti-static mat, you'll see we can just get this pin in with a little bit of force. So we just want to tap. So though you didn't see it, you just want to put the pin in, then you can just tap it off nicely. It's quite a loose fitting pin this, so it only requires a little tap, so I could just push it with my hand. Some pins might want a full tap, and we can see how that is back together like that. That's all that, good done. And now, just for the last touch, we're going to put the stock back on, which I kind of don't want to do, just because I'm going to be modifying the stock very shortly to just be nicer with batteries. Again, this gun runs quite a high current because it's not very efficient. Oh, there goes the camera. Knew that would happen eventually. Right, go on, camera. Yeah, just putting the stock on. I don't really want to put it back on, but yeah, you see, right in front of you. And we're just going to push this back. And that's the gun back together. So you can see I've run my gun quite light. I'll show you what mags I use. I've got one here. So this is a EPM mag, enhanced polymer mag. I have 6 of these. They fit very nicely. I know I'm going to put a Vincent putting the mag in a gun, but you can see it clips in quite nicely. These do it like massively amplify the looks of your gun by like 10-fold. But yeah, so I'm going to quickly go over the external. So this is an SS80 clockwise threaded. I know everything's counterclockwise threaded, but this is clockwise threaded. G&G mock suppressor, but it's actually just a barrel extension. So it helps the fact that I've got the longer barrel because this helps to extend it and keep it nice and snug. Sight-wise, this is a Vortex Crossfire. Not the cheapest of sights. I don't really I don't go full elitist for my sights. It's just that I like to have because Vortex have their lifetime warranties, it's actually maybe worth getting these if these get shot out a lot. And since this is a very kind of fast-paced gun, it makes sense to have a sight on there, which if it does get shot out, I can get a free replacement for it, you know, regardless of how it happens. Grip-wise, this is just this is an element grip, and this was needed to fit the motor in because the G&P grip, because it's quite old, the manufacturer's different to like tighter tolerances, and it wouldn't fit any motors in it very well. Even the SHS, which is like a standard, quite a small can motor, wouldn't fit that in, so this is a different grip, and it is shimmed inside and dremeled away to make sure it fits to the gearbox perfectly. And on the back we have a crane stock, just a standard crane stock for batteries, and that's going to be changed because of yeah. And we've got this flip up sights the gun came with here. But yeah, so all in all, that is that gun. This is going to be needed to edit heavily. Done there. So that's that done. I will edit together, and then we will see what will happen. You can judge for yourselves on this. On a side note, although I've tried to keep this gun like a little bit more milsim looking compared to my if I get it for you, my what gets called the Speed Soft gun. This thing, you can see with the red charging and or the trigger. I do like to put different colored triggers in guns. This was my LVOA. This is a Krytac LVOA that's like just it's the only thing Krytac about it is the upper and lower receiver, like the actual just the metal. And the gearbox is the Krytac gearbox shell, but there's nothing Krytac else in there. That is a fully custom, very, very low power gun. Anyway, low power, high efficiency gun. Yep. So this is the run and gun. And I might take it to HQ sometime soon. I've been looking at going to HQ. I usually stick to Humber Airsoft, but I need to kind of vary myself and go to different sites. So I'll probably join you guys in this site. I've said I can't go to the 25th. I've said that because I'm pretty sure I won't be going, but I could see if I can get some free time and I will be able to go, and then I will join you. But for now, I've said I am not going, but I can always get a lift at some point, I'm sure. So let's this gun back together, and I will edit this kind of. This is said. I'm saying this after the video, but I will edit all of what I've just done together, and you will see a nice finished product, which should hopefully be fun. Thank you for watching. If you've got any questions, any specifics, or you're thinking, oh, I actually do want to see like a proper in-depth gun internal teardown, or hey, I have problems with my gun, or I think my gun could be improved in this, or I want my gun to do this instead of this, then give me and Alex. I don't have a Facebook profile picture, as I'm sure some of you will realise, but it's Alex and James Logan. If you give us a PM or a DM on Facebook, we will help. We'll try and figure out like kind of the best plan of action for your case, whether it be modifications, what kind of modifications, would it be hop, gearbox, etc., cost, etc., like that. We will charge you for stuff because although this is, we're a society and we're all like kind of friends and everything, the problem is that parts do cost money and time also costs money. So we have to make sure. We have to make sure that we can kind of like keep on going because these airsoft guns can become very time consuming after a while. So yep. But thank you for watching, and we'll see in the future if we do more of these.